Okay, well, great. First of all, thanks for taking time out of your morning to meet with me. I'm honored to be speaking with you all. I have some slides that I'm going to go over and tell a couple of stories and things that we learned at Amazon, mistakes that we made. Hopefully, you can avoid some of those, uh, uh, you know, the mistakes that we made. But as I go through these slides, if you have any questions, feel free to um, chime in or interrupt and ask questions during the presentation, or you can save the questions till afterwards. Either way, I'm fine with that. But so just a little bit about my background. So I started at Amazon in 1998 and worked there for a little over 12 years. In 98, at Amazon, the company, it was relatively small at the time. The total company corporate area was about 100 people. The room I'm looking at was probably bigger than any room we had in the Amazon office. We were all in one office there, and you could fit the whole product development team in, definitely in this room here that I'm looking at. And so got to see Amazon grow from that. We were just shipping books just out of two fulfillment centers in the US. And over the 12 years went to sell pretty much everything worldwide, and then started a bunch of new businesses like Amazon Web Services, Prime Video, got into hardware and devices with Kindle and the Echo devices and everything in between. During that, I held a number of different roles. And for a little over 2 years, I was lucky enough to work with Jeff Bezos to be his chief of staff or technical advisor, as that was called at the time. And, so spending 10 plus hours a day with Jeff for 2 years was an incredible learning experience for me. And I want to share some of the lessons that I learned, during that time working with Jeff, also at Amazon. The other thing I just want to mention about that particular time, it was 2003 to 2005. So it was right as the time where we were taking these crazy ideas that a lot of people thought we shouldn't do, move into what would become known as cloud computing. That term didn't exist. Should we become a device manufacturer? Because we're just an e-commerce retailing company. What are we doing making devices and building B2B software? So took those ideas and now they're household names. But the other thing that wasn't really talked about that much is Jeff Bezos spent about half of his time, a good chunk of his time at that time period, figuring out how can I build or instrument Amazon, the company, so I don't have to be in the room to make all of the decisions. So he invented really, with other people at Amazon, some pretty cool processes that we have found to be universally applicable. Small companies, large companies, B2B, B2C, nonprofits, government organizations. And so that's what I'm excited to tell you about right now. So I'm going to share my screen here. Start this slideshow. Okay, can you guys see the screen there?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is about 5 years ago. My colleague Bill Carr, my co-author and also co-founder of Working Backwards LLC, he was at a venture capital conference in the U.S. up here in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle, and a couple dozen CEOs from a wide range of companies, and the topic of Amazon came up. And one executive rose his hand and said, Amazon, I don't get it. How are they into so many different things, from cloud computing to retailing? They even have their own airline fleet. And I'm still trying to figure out how to open my stores reliably one at a time. And so Bill and I, later that night, we were talking about the conversation, and we realized a couple of things. One is that we got that question all the time. How does Amazon actually work? Two is this was a Fortune 100 CEO who said that, and we thought, if he doesn't know the answer, he's smart and he has a lot of smart people around him. most people don't actually know the answer, and we hadn't seen any comprehensive or correct answer about how Amazon works out there in either blogs, podcasts, articles. Everything we saw was either inaccurate, incomplete, or just not correct at all. And between Bill and I, we had spent 27 years at Amazon. So he was there for 15, I was there for 12. We thought we had a pretty good answer to that question: how does Amazon work? And so to write a book about Amazon at that time, we weren't really sure if we could do it. I'm an engineer by training, and so the first thing we did is we wrote a PR FAQ document, which I'll talk a little bit later, and it's an Amazon type document and a sample chapter, and just then sent an email to Jeff Bezos and said, "Hey," I said, "Hey Jeff, Bill and I are thinking of writing a book that describes how Amazon works. What do you think?" I had no idea whether we'd get a cease and desist letter or what happened, but he responded pretty quickly, and he said, "Done right, I'd love to see a book like this out here in the public dialogue." So it was both reassuring, but also kind of scary. The words "done right" when Jeff says that, he has pretty high standards, so it took a little longer to write than we thought. But that's really what we set out to do, was working backwards, is really to answer at a fundamental level and a practical level about how Amazon works. And our goal was really to help that next generation of business leaders. We wanted to talk about some of these advances in management science, is how we viewed them. And so we're not trying to claim every company should copy these processes, but we feel that they were worthy of public study, so you can learn about them and decide, you make your own choice whether you should implement one or more of these processes. So that's just how we decided and stumbled really upon this book, Working Backwards. And if you go back to 2015, Jeff Bezos, in one of his shareholder letters, he said he wanted Amazon to be an invention machine. And the way he described that was, he wanted Amazon to do things that only a company with large scale can do, do these types of things, but also remain true to its entrepreneurial roots and want to move fast and be innovative, make mistakes, and just keep moving forward. So he wanted the best of both worlds, the best of a big company and the best of a startup, which is quite typical with Jeff. When you give him, and would you want either A or B, and the answer is usually yes, I want both. And to try to figure out a way to get that. But then he went on to another topic and really didn't explain what he meant by the invention machine. And so as we were trying to answer that question, how does Amazon work, just keep this picture in mind here about this is really the invention machine, about the nuts and bolts about how Amazon works. The first thing is the leadership principles. So it's hard, you cannot understate the impact the leadership principles have on Amazon. I'll talk about what makes them special. And for this group, it's not the individual leadership principles that make it special, but it's just what Amazon has done with them and how they've incorporated into the company. And then you take a look at these 5 basic processes. How do you hire people, retain and talent, and always raise the bar? As you get bigger, how do you organize into teams where getting bigger, the bureaucracy doesn't slow you down? You want to accelerate your the pace that you build and invent things for customers. Then how do you make decisions, especially with a small startup? It's pretty easy to talk about making decisions because everyone's at the same table. But as you start to expand a little bit, you have to think about a formal way of making decisions and consistent decisions in the company. Working backwards is just the process. It's the name of the book, but it's also a named process at Amazon, a product discovery process about how do you take an idea, make it better, refine it, and then decide whether to greenlight or approve that and fund the idea. And then metrics, excuse me. How do you measure things just when they're starting off, all the way to when they're hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in a business? So these are the same questions. Amazon didn't face any new questions in terms of processes, but came up with some, in some cases, radically different answers. And so we're going to go and talk about all these components of the Amazon's invention machine. And again, at any time, feel free to chime in with questions, and we'll have plenty of time at the end to discuss them too. So the first one is the leadership principles. So Amazon has 16 of them. It's a large number of leadership principles. When they first came out, Amazon had 10. There was a revision that went up to 14. And then right about when Andy Jassy took over as CEO, they added 2 more leadership principles. So in some cases, yeah, I mean, that's really noteworthy or remarkable, but not all that useful for, someone starting their own company and so what I want to talk about is why we created these leadership principles at Amazon. We created them. It was at the time I was working with Jeff as his chief of staff in 2004, and they came out in 2005. But really what Jeff wanted was just a consistent and actionable framework to make decisions, all around the company when he wasn't in the room. And so if you look at a bunch of Amazon products and services, they are remarkably consistent in terms of focus on customer obsession, long-term thinking, invent and simplify. And that's exactly what Jeff wanted to do. He wanted to create a set of leadership principles where people can rely on them when you've got to make decisions fast, when you don't have all the information you like. So Jeff used to, he would always say that, you want to collect for most types of decisions, you want to collect about 70% of the information that you need. If you wait to collect 100%, your competitors will likely get there first. So you have to be somewhat uncomfortable with making these decisions without all the data that you'd like to collect. And then, when senior executives aren't in the room, again, when you're a small startup, everyone's at the same table, you can just pause and say, okay, let's talk about this. How are we going to make this decision? It's a good teaching and learning experience for everyone at the table. But as you grow and you move essentially beyond a single room, then you need to have some type of consistent framework to codify what you as founders, what makes the company special, so you can replicate that and teach that and have it a scalable, repeatable process throughout the company. So that was really why we created them at Amazon, and then, but that's not enough, and it's also not enough, by the way, just to read and memorize them. I think right now it's almost 800 words in the Amazon leadership principles. I don't know anyone who can, recite them verbatim, every word. But I can tell you that any leader who's been at Amazon for any, period of time, measured months or greater, it really becomes part of their DNA. And so you don't really memorize the leadership principles, you act them out, and so they just become part of you. And that's one of the things that makes them so powerful. And there's a saying at Amazon called good intentions don't work, mechanisms do. So we had these leadership principles, and now what do we do with them? So we needed to create mechanisms or processes and build those processes from the ground up, using the leadership principles. And that way they're not just posters on the wall, as we would call them. So as I go through and talk about some of these Amazon processes, you may hear me mention a few leadership principles, because we really did try to weave them into these processes. So just with the act of doing them, you're embodying and reinforcing the leadership principles. That's how you define your culture, and you get in that culture gets stronger and really solidifies every day. And as a young organization, you really have to be careful about that and be very deliberate about your culture, before and after you create your leadership principles, by the way, because you will get a corporate culture, and if it's not intentional, it will likely not be the one that you want. So you really want to have an intentional corporate culture. And especially in the beginning, the senior leaders really need to take care of it and intend it and make sure that it grows in the right direction. So that first process I want to talk about is Amazon's hiring process, which is called the bar raiser process. And it was created in 1999. And at this point, I'd been at Amazon for about a year, and most of the groups had just an insane number of people we need to hire. You would not get your work done unless you had filled out your team and hired more people. We just had so much to do. We were moving so fast. And we didn't really have a formal hiring process. So with a lack of a hiring process, people would fall back onto good intentions. So we would look at, well, what hiring process did we use at our last company? I talked to a few other people. Okay, let's figure out how we're going to do this hiring process. And what happened is we had, the way an executive put it, we had new people hiring new people, hiring new people. And so that was a great way to lose control of who you are as a company. And so at this point in time, we could have asked the hiring managers to, well, let's try harder, because I mentioned we were all in these small rooms, lots of people. You would look at a new hire, and after spending a couple of days or a couple of weeks with them, you'd realize if this person interviewed for a manager 2 desks down, they probably would not have gotten a job. And so we had inconsistent hiring practices. So we created Amazon bar raisers. A lot of it we actually borrowed from Microsoft. They had a similar approach, but we put an Amazon spin on it. And it's stayed the same since, it's grown a lot, obviously, but it's a simple, repeatable process that has stayed the same all the way through 2024. So, why has it been so successful, and why does bar raisers work? One is that we realized that the hiring process at its heart is a data gathering exercise. And so that's just kind of a light bulb and a switch that went off on our heads. And so what we wanted, if you want to have a data gathering exercise, you need a couple of things to make it consistent. The first thing is you need to have objective criteria. So we wanted everyone who was hiring to use the same set of objective criteria to make the decision. That meant not doing things like brain teaser questions. How many marbles can you fit in a football stadium? How many windows are there in Seattle? You get to see how people think and with questions like that, but it doesn't really tell you, we found, whether they're going to be an effective leader at Amazon once they join. We also wanted to reduce bias, and a lot of the things that you do, there's just inherent bias. You can do some simple things about, don't talk to the next person who's going to interview to say this is a great candidate, or you need to go drill down into these areas. You want everyone to go into the interview saying, I know my job and here's the data I need to collect. You don't want to dilute their bias, the interviewer, with information that gets in their way of collecting the data. And it reinforces the Amazon leadership principles, because that's exactly what we were trying to find out with the bar raiser process. Was we were using behavioral interviews to really figure out, do these people embody the Amazon leadership principles? The other thing is, there's some things about it that make it a scalable, repeatable process in terms of writing your feedback down, without telling anyone about it first. So you can put some pressure on you that you have to have a real cohesive argument that you're going to show to your peers, and you're going to have to not really defend, but explain your statements. And wasn't an interview loop that I participated in where I didn't either teach people tips and techniques about how to be a better interviewer, or I looked at what other people did and said, wow, this is great. This is a tool I'm going to use to make me a more effective interviewer. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold, so bear with me with the cough. So this was, it really was Amazon's first scalable, repeatable, and informal process. And so the objective criteria I mentioned are the Amazon leadership principles. That was really the strongest correlation we found out. If to answer the question, will this person be a successful leader at Amazon if we hire them? Really, the answer to that is we had to get data to say, well, what have they done in the past where this candidate has embodied the Amazon leadership principles? So that was the objective. data-driven assignments we were given as interviewers. All sorts of techniques we used, and about urgency bias. There's the role in the bar raiser process called a bar raiser. They don't report up into the chain of the manager. They can't be the hiring manager or and the group that's going to get the person. That removed urgency bias, because their role was solely to say, is this person going to raise the bar at Amazon? They didn't care if me as a manager, if Colin's not going to get his work done if I don't hire someone. So we wanted to get rid of that urgency bias. Personal and confirmation bias, you get rid of that by going back to the objective criteria. And it's, as I talked about, it's a feedback loop. The more you do it, the better you get, and the more it reinforces what good leadership looks like at Amazon, is how Amazon defines it. I probably spent, on average, a day a week hiring people, either interviewing in debriefs, selling candidates, talking to candidates. And most of that time was really looking at and describing what good leadership looks like according to Amazon's leadership principles. So just by doing the act of the hiring process, it made me a stronger cultural fit for Amazon, and really crystallize what the culture, Amazon's leadership principle and culture means. So for young organizations or newer organizations, when we work with them, and often I'll hear, well, it's not like it was a year ago. The company has changed. I ask a couple of questions. First one is, well, show me your core values or leadership principles. Are they written down? And most often at that stage they are. And then I ask, well, tell me about your hiring process, and tell me about how you attract people who are going to deliberately make the the culture stronger, that these people are going to reinforce your culture. So if you have 5 people in your company and you're going to go to 30, if you don't have your leadership principles defined, or a deliberate data-driven process to make sure you're getting people who reinforce your culture, when you go from 5 to 30, most of those people are going to be new. They're going to bring whatever culture and core values they had from other companies. And that's how you lose control about, well, it makes sense when they say, well, it's not like it was. It's because the mistake was made a couple steps upstream in terms of not having a deliberate process to to get people who reinforce and embody your culture. The next process I want to talk about is really organizing. So as you add more people, how do you make sure that you're increasing your velocity versus slowing down? Sounds easy, but this is a mistake we made at Amazon. As bar raisers started working, we hired a lot more people, but we realized we were spending a lot more time coordinating and talking about doing things than actually inventing for customers. And so at this point, there you can have a fork in the road, and you have a decision to make. And so the traditional approach, and we tried this, by the way, and we tried it for about a year. It really didn't work for us. But as the complexity of the business increased, as we were going into multiple geographies, multiple categories, multiple types of products, we wanted to say, okay, we're going to get better. We're going to build some coordination and communication tools so we know what everyone's working on, and everyone else can see, what I'm doing, and I can see what everyone else is doing. We'll work out dependencies. We'll try to, call those out as early as possible, get people together to resolve them. And so let's we'll build a set of world-class tools for coordination and communication. The other path, which is the one we eventually chose, was really as still the business is getting more complex, but what we decided to do was we wanted to reduce or eliminate as much coordination and collaboration as possible. We wanted to view dependencies as defects, that we wanted to get rid of dependencies, because the fewer dependencies that you have, that means you can increase your autonomy and ownership. And by the way, these dependencies, they can take a number of different shapes and forms. There could be technical dependencies. In order for me to get this done, we've got to refactor the code base. It's going to take a long time to make these changes. It can be just how you make decisions. Sometimes you have to get three or four people from different or more from different groups together to talk about, okay, how are we going to build this? And if each one of those people have veto power, not because they're trying to destroy your idea, it's just because they have a list of things that they need to get done, and you're number 8 on their list if you're lucky. Then you're just going to get frustrated, and you're going to spend more and more time trying to get resources or talk about getting resources or convincing people to get resources than actually building. So this is the approach we took, and it's called single-threaded leadership and single-threaded teams at Amazon. For smaller organizations, not as not as important right now, but some lessons that you can take away is um, you know try not to build unnecessary dependencies. And if you see that you're starting to coordinate, having more meetings than you want, or you have to talk to so many people, the cheapest time to fix and reduce it is today, because the more dependencies go undiscovered or unresolved, the more expensive they are to fix down the road. So this is just a great quote that Dave Limp, who was the former head of devices at Amazon, he's now actually the CEO of Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' space company. But the best way to fail at inventing something is by making it someone's part-time job. So as your companies grow, and if you have something where, hey, this is something we want to place a big bet on for the company, Jeff Bezos often would tell me, you want to put your biggest leaders on your biggest opportunities. And your biggest opportunities may or may not be your biggest current businesses at the same time, at the point in time. They could be the same, but they could be different. So at Amazon, it was not that unusual to take a senior leader running a big business and saying, okay, you're now on a team of 5 people and you're going to work on this thing. Good chance it may fail, but if it works, it's going to be really big. And there are a bunch of examples. Andy Jassy for AWS, for instance, moved over to a very risky endeavor with a small team, high chance of failure, but if it did succeed, it became what AWS is today. So these no org structure or philosophy is perfect. So single-threaded teams, they're really built for speed and innovation. So if you really want to maximize the amount of innovation and speed and ownership that you get, this may be a model that you want to consider. And so really single-threaded leadership is just asking these 3 questions, three very simple questions, hard to get right all the time, but who's the most senior person working on this initiative and no other initiative? So full time. And again, this is hard to do when you have a smaller organization, and so it's not something you want to do if you have like a 5 or 10 person company. But do they have the skills and capabilities to make this idea a reality? If you have $100 million idea or $1 billion idea, you want to put someone early on who knows how to build something like that. Otherwise, we found that you're probably not going to get achieve the size and scale that you want. And then do they have the necessary control over the resources? Doesn't mean they all need to report to them, but when you greenlight it, you want to get rid of all of the coordinating and communicating. So, when you greenlight it, allocate those resources up front. And it can be a matrix org chart. So this is not an org chart, it's just the philosophy. But those are the 3 questions. So you have to have a name, a yes, and a yes to have single-threaded leadership. And for most big projects that we're stalling at Amazon, if we asked these questions and we didn't have a name and a yes, that was the reason why it was failing or not getting there as quickly as we wanted. So I'm going to move on to the next one, which is narratives. And this was in 2004, again, when I was working with Jeff. He had a 4-hour staff meeting where different teams would, weekly staff meeting where different teams would come in and present, their area, or we'd have to make different types of decisions. And it was with Jeff and then the S team. So basically his direct reports are the senior management team at Amazon. And as the stakes were getting higher, The decisions were getting bigger. The cost of getting things wrong was getting, more expensive each day. We were doing what any other company was doing at the time. Those teams would come in with slides and present things. And after one particularly painful S team meeting, Jeff just said, "Okay, starting next Tuesday, anyone who comes into this staff meeting and presents something, we're going to require that they write a narrative or a written memo." And this was in June of 2004. It was about 3 years later, Jeff would call switching to narratives. Amazon switch to narratives was one of the best things that Amazon has ever done, and it's gained a competitive advantage. Jeff doesn't use those terms lightly. So I want to tell you why it actually worked out really well from Amazon, and never really went back to using slides for decision making. Now you'll notice I'm using slides now. There are slides that are at Amazon, but they're for things like all hands meetings or broadcasting information out. But if you're getting a group of people together and looking at a complex topic to make a decision, we realized again the hard way that slides were the wrong tool to do that. And so narratives worked really well for Amazon for a couple of reasons. One is it puts a little friction on the person or the team presenting the idea. You can come in and just start talking about an idea. You're really excited about it. But we wanted to take a step back and, before you get an expensive meeting, you put a little friction, and the presenting team needs to do some work. And in order to write a narrative, it really forces those people, and I call them the presenting team, but they're the authors of the documents. They really need to think through and synthesize their argument and make a clear and compelling argument for what they're trying to do or asking for help. In terms of pure information density, it's about 7 to 9 times more pixels you can get in the same amount of space. We wanted to, focus on the idea, not the presentation. A lot of times when people ask, "Well, how did that meeting go?" Often an answer will be, "Oh, this, the presenter, Colin, he was so boring," or the presentation, I would have done it differently. Well, customers really don't care about that at the end of the day. They care about that a company is going to make an idea that's going to improve their lives somehow. So we wanted to elevate the importance of the idea, not the charisma of the presenter. Third thing is, business is complicated, and so life doesn't fit into these hierarchical bullet points and indents. So you can use a narrative much more effectively for these multi-causal complicated arguments, to make those. The last one is I wanted to put is that narratives, they're unambiguous. You may disagree with what's in a narrative, but it's actually very clear to everyone in the room the case that is being made. When you have bullet points or sentence fragments, those are potential sources of defects, because what happens with a bullet point or a sentence fragment is everyone else in the room completes that second half slightly differently. So you'll have 30 or 50 different variations of what the actual idea is. And so it's hard to talk about whether you should go do the idea if everyone has a slightly different version of what that idea is. So how these meetings run, they're kind of weird if you've never been into one before, but you would say, "Okay, well, let's start the meeting." Someone hits a share button and the room goes silent for about 20 minutes. And this is if it's a 6-page narrative. And so when people are writing, asking questions, making comments, and any type of collaborative doc. But what's really happening, if you were to look at it through a different spectrum, you would just see a massive amount of information, high bandwidth information transfer from the presenting team over to the senior leaders in the room, the audience. And so if you do that over the first, 20 minutes, a high bandwidth, very efficient information transfer, then the next 40 minutes, you can have a data-driven discussion about the issue at hand. And, with lack of data, you get opinions. And so we've found all in, we make better decisions if we have better data, and we wanted to make it as efficient as possible. So these narrative meetings are not any longer than a slide presentation meeting. 60 minutes is still 60 minutes, whether you're looking at slides or reading a narrative and having a discussion. but all in, we got about 20 times the amount of information. So we could have a much higher quality discussion and typically would make better decisions. So that's why it was super powerful for Amazon and all the companies we worked with since at Working Backwards. We haven't seen anyone go from slides to narratives and then say, yeah, let's go back to slides. So it is a different way of working, but it's a much richer way, a more effective way of getting information to make complicated decisions. So there's different types of narratives. I'll talk about the Working Backwards PRFAQ next. That's a written document. Things like monthly or quarterly business reviews. If you're looking at annual or quarterly planning, those are all narratives, M&A reviews, and anything that's worth getting a group of people together in a room to discuss. Is we found a narrative is usually a more effective tool than just talking about it or just having slides to go over it. So this working backwards process here, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's the product discovery process. If you want to think about that, if someone has an idea, you say, great, go write a working backwards document. So the tool we use is a PRFAQ, short for press release and frequently asked questions. But at its heart, the working backwards process is a customer obsessed product development process. And customer obsession is one of Amazon's first leadership principle. And we realized again early 2000s that as we were starting to develop more and more products, we were forgetting the customer more often than we should. And so what Jeff wanted to make sure is that the customer, even though they weren't in the room, they would be with us from the very beginning of an idea all the way through when it was released. And so thus was how the working backwards process came about. And so when someone has an idea, the first thing you do is you have to write a press release, which is often the last thing that a lot of companies write when the product or service is ready to be launched. But so what you have to do, again, a couple simple, they're simple tasks, but they're actually quite hard to do, especially if you're inventing in a greenfield space. One, the press release has to clearly define the problem. You have to clearly define who the customer is. And then you clearly define what is your solution to this particular problem for this particular set of customers. And then the last one is you have to convince yourself that customers will change their behavior from their next best alternative. And there always is a next best alternative, which could just be do nothing, by the way, or stick with a competitor. But you have to convince yourself that yes, this product for this solution for this problem for these customers, we reasonably expect that customers are going to change their behavior to use or buy this product or service. And you have to do that in one page. It has to be written to the customer in language that the customer can understand. And if it's not compelling enough, the beauty of it is anyone can read a press release and at the end say, yeah, I'm excited as a customer, I would buy this or use that. If you're not at that point, it's an iterative process. So you go back, you gather feedback and you write the press release again. The second part of the document is the FAQ, the frequently asked questions. And this is just, first, we typically at Amazon divided the FAQ into external FAQs. Those are things that customers or press would ask about your product, and then internal FAQs. So the external FAQ, think of it as the Socratic method or dialogue that you're having with your customers, skeptical customers, about any questions that they would ask and answer. Then you have to answer about the product. How much is it going to cost? Why should I change my behavior? What's in it for me? How is this better than what's out there today? How heavy is it? Whatever you're trying to describe, you need to actually answer those questions at a pretty fundamental level of detail. We found that you can get so excited in the idea, it's easy to forget some of the answers to those questions. And if everyone walks away, great idea, but has a slightly different or a very different idea of what those simple answers are to those questions, that's when you introduce a lot of thrash and you're not getting alignment for everyone's building the same thing. The internal FAQs, those are all of the hard questions you need to ask and answer about how do we take this idea and make it a reality. So, we talk about the total addressable market. There are lots of great ideas. This TAM that is actually one of the biggest reasons why ideas don't get greenlit. Great idea, great solution to a real customer problem, and we think people would buy it, but it's just not big enough to be worth doing. We have a more other more efficient or bigger ways that we could deploy resources. So, because as you change who your customer is and what the problem you're trying to solve is and what your solution is, the TAM is also changing. These things are interrelated, and so when you get to that point, if you have great thing, you need to make sure it's big enough to be worth doing. This is where you now get into the unit economics and P&L. A lot of companies, they build a pro forma income statement first. That's kind of aspirational. It's like, yeah, this would be a good business if we had these gross margin characteristics, and you go down through the P&L, but it's not real yet. So I personally discount any unit economics unless I have a good idea of what the team is actually building. Because if you haven't defined that, you can't really say what your unit economics are. You can say what you want them to be, but you haven't really stated whether you can actually achieve that. And then you can talk about dependencies also. What's going to be required to get this product, to market. You can internal dependencies, external dependencies. Again, these dependencies are the longer they go uncovered, the more expensive they are to address. So you want to address these, and it's really cheap to address them in an FAQ document, because if you don't have it, you just rewrite it, and you got to resolve those dependencies. Conditions for success. That's another important thing to know going into building something. This project will be successful if these things happen. You make a prediction and to say here's what will determine whether we're successful or not. It removes the bias then of getting people so caught up in the idea, as the data starts to come in, or if customers aren't really using it so much, you want to know before the experiment starts what the conditions for success are. A couple other things I just wanted to mention about this process. I talked about it's customer obsessed. The second point up in the upper right, it values truth seeking versus selling. And this is important just because we found, me included, I get excited about ideas. And, now at this point, it's not the time to sell the idea. It's time to kick the tires, uncover the truth about the idea, figure out where its strengths and weaknesses are. There's no idea that I've seen that has gone through this process unscathed, where, oh, it's an awesome idea and I can't think of a way to make it better. The PRFAQ process always, and I mean always, I've seen it has made it through, and the idea has come out better, but you have to have that truth-seeking mindset over selling. The other thing is, there's a difference between velocity and speed. Speed is just 100 kilometers an hour, and you could be zigging and zagging. With velocity, there's that directional component. So this may feel like you're slowing down a bit because you're writing documents, you're asking critical questions that sometimes require a lot of information to go gather to answer that. But really what you're doing is you're getting the alignment component of velocity set. So once that is set, then you can go race forward and everyone's moving to the same goal. So we've found that the PRFAQ process was an incredibly efficient way to run through a large number of experiments, more than we could otherwise do with any of the other tools and techniques that we had, to get from the point about where I have an idea to not when it launches, but to where it's actually generating a significant amount of value for customers. So measured from those 2 points, this is a very efficient way to get there. And all in, if you can run more experiments per unit time than your competitors, you're typically going to out-innovate them. So that's another reason why we, at Amazon, we stuck with the process. Last thing I'll mention about it, I put its continuous innovation process throughout the year, throughout the quarter. You want to have a steady stream of ideas that you're running through this. So this is not a planning exercise. It's something that you need to be doing, all year round, where innovation is just part of your regular diet, if you will. When I was working with Jeff, and then when I was, an executive at Amazon, I would read many PR FAQs a day, certainly many a week, sometimes several, a day. And that's just your ideas are your lifeblood of the future. And so you want to have a good process where you're vetting lots of ideas, making them better, and choosing the best ideas from that. Last one I want to mention is just about metrics. And if there's one thing you could remember here, manage your inputs and not your outputs. Talk a little bit about what that means. This is another mistake that we made. We were trying to manage and to control our output metrics directly. We found that that was a futile exercise that really didn't work for us. But so yeah, and a lot of companies, you're just starting out and you're kind of in this first box here. This is, I don't know, probably like 1995, 96, a picture of Jeff. You don't really have to go look for a lot of data. It will find you. Your customers are going to talk to you. The person to the left and the right of you in the room are going to talk to you. So all of the information you need to know what's going on with my company and my customers is just it's just, you hear it. You can't avoid it if you wanted to with smaller companies. But as your company grows and you get more and more proxies between you and another internal group, or you and your customers, you really need to create a formal data process so you get the same high fidelity information that you did as when you were two people or three people as a company, because you make high quality decisions because you have all that information. You need to create that, and it doesn't come for free. So you have to get this type of a formal data process so you can make these types of decisions quickly. And so what we did at Amazon, a lot of companies, as you go through the ranks and you say, I'm going to focus on big picture strategy stuff. Jeff Bezos rejected that. He wanted every senior leader to understand at a deep data-driven level what was going on in their area. And so what we wanted to do was you have a data-driven answer each week, essentially, for what's going on with the business. A lot of companies do that pretty well. What's going on with my customers, and answered with data. And we found that those are really two different ways of measuring the same thing in the long run, by the way. But in order to do this, it wasn't measuring one or two, or the one metric that rules them all, or I'm just going to focus on these 5 metrics. We found we couldn't actually do that, because what was important one week may not be as important the next week. We found we had to measure hundreds of metrics. And if you do that in the right way, you're looking at that data and it's a constant stream of data. What you then do is you can identify actions and initiatives that did they impact our input and output metrics in the right way. And you can also, the data will tell you, hey, something's not right here, something's not normal, so you can react appropriately and quick enough with the right data time in order to course correct or respond to these events, be they internal or external events. And so to create a formal system that does that was really powerful for Amazon. And in the way that we did that, first thing we did is we wanted to focus on our input metrics. And so output metrics are things like revenue, free cash flow, NPS, customer satisfaction. Those are things that you want to drive in the right direction. Input metrics, on the other hand, those are the things that if you do them right, they improve the customer experience. They actually create value for customers and for the company, and they bring about the desired results in your output. So you can't just say this is an input metric. You actually have to start measuring it and see the link that, yes, there is a link between these input metrics and this output metrics. Some people call input metrics leading indicators. I like to use a much stronger term. It's controllable input metrics. And, most of these are customer facing, by the way. But the controllable means you're making a conscious decision to invest resources or do initiatives to drive this input metric in the right direction or not, or invest it somewhere else. So, it's your choice whether you want to control this metric or not. And the light went on when we realized that we can forecast our outputs, but we can't really directly control them. That the best and most efficient way to generate revenue, profit, and have fantastic NPS or customer experience is to identify all of these input metrics. Then you can measure and audit and control those and run your business. So Amazon does care about revenue, about profit, about customer experience. You don't get to $500 billion in revenue without not focusing on revenue. We just found that this was the most efficient way for us to achieve these big goals. Really quickly, a couple techniques on how you figure out what your input metrics are. One is just a simple but very effective method. Start from your outputs and drill down. I'll give an example of that. The other one is mapping your customer experience end to end, and then saying for each of the points where our customer or partners interact with us, what are all of the metrics so we can measure what's going on there, and in terms of each of these steps. You know exactly what's happening with your customer, because if you know that, that's a good source of information then to figure out, well, what solutions do we develop for these problems that we know customers are having. When something goes wrong, post-mortem, asking the question, well, what could we or should we have been measuring to predict that this thing would have happened, so we would have avoided it or prevented it from happening? That yields a lot of metrics that you should be measuring. And then, uncovering and establishing your flywheel. I won't go into that today, don't have time to. That was a concept we borrowed from Jim Collins and his book, Good to Great. Awesome book if you haven't read it. But this is an example of creating an input tree. You just start with your output metric A, and you say, well, what activities do we need to do in order to drive A in the right direction, and how do we measure that? And then you just recursively go down until you hit the bare metal. And if you do this with a few output metrics, you'll quickly realize that's how you get to the hundreds of metrics. So you need techniques to monitor those in an efficient manner, which I don't have time, unfortunately, to get into today. But identifying and managing your input metrics, doing that as early on as possible, that it will help you, especially when times aren't going so well. When all the charts are going up and to the right, you could do anything and you still grow 30%, year over year, quarter over quarter, year over year. But it's when things start to change, or new competitors come into the market, or your customers now have higher expectations. The companies that truly understand what drives their business at an input level, and they're able to generate these outputs, they just have a better operational grasp of their company. And especially in the tough times, those are the ones that shine over some of the other ones who they haven't developed this muscle. So the sooner you can do this, the better as a small organization. So that's the whirlwind tour of, try to answer in, 50 minutes or so how Amazon works. But I'll open it up for questions right now.
Fantastic, Colin. Thank you very much. I'm just going to grab something. So we have 3 copies of the Bible here. But we weren't able to go into a few of those things in detail, but they're covered in a hell of a lot more detail in Colin's fantastic book. But do we have some questions? We've got about 8 or 9 minutes for Colin. He'll be able to hear you clearly if you have a question.
Hello. Hi, Colin. I'm Lauren, one of 4 Amazonians in the room. Just wanted to say it's remarkable how much the book has captured what the experience of actually still being at Amazon AWS now is like. It's quite amazing for everyone in the room. It really is an incredible kind of snapshot. I guess my fun question was, what's your favorite LP?
So, if I had to pick one, so they're not ordered or they don't have numbers, it would really be customer obsession. Mostly because your customers are never satisfied, so they're going to always push you to do better. When we released Prime with 2-day shipping, the most common question was, well, how do I get 1-day shipping? You need 1-day shipping. Well, can I get it the same day? So that also led Amazon to go solve all these different problems for different businesses. So we didn't think of ourselves as retailers, or the first day I met Jeff was March of '98. He said, I want to be Amazon be Earth's most customer centric company. And that's what pushes you to go in all these different areas too. So I'd have to be that one, but I like them all.
Any other questions? Yeah, Ryan at the back.
Thank you so much. It was a great presentation. There's so much here that I think many of us probably want to implement in our own organisations. Where would you start first? What would be the first thing that you would begin with in a new organisation that you went into?
So in a new organization, the places to start are to codify your thinking as founders, to make sure that you take the special sauce that has made this company successful and turn it into a scalable, teachable, and repeatable process. So really figuring out things that are inherently obvious to you as a founder. When you look at, if you find yourself explaining, well, this isn't what I would do and here's why, getting those types of core values or leadership principles written down and codified. That way everyone's trying to do the right thing, but if you want them to start from the same set of first principles. And then the second part would be, not once you have those, to really focus on the hiring process to make sure that the next set of people you bring in are going to reinforce that and make your culture and make it stronger versus change it. Because the cultures, they're a bit like concrete. They'll set pretty quickly, and you want to make sure that by the time that they set, it's what you want it. You've designed the way the concrete's going to be laid out. Those would be the two places I would start.
Cool. Chris.
Thanks, Colin. My name's Chris. Just regarding the reduced collaboration and coordination, how was that initially implemented and communicated with staff?
So we were probably, it was bigger. It was 2001, 2002 when we started to do this. So it was 1,000+ people, and it sounds small, but in just in the tech organization. So we started with the places that we could easily pick apart and separate, and learned how to identify dependencies, how to get rid of them, how to build your group. So this isn't something that happens overnight, and it's not. And I would not recommend starting with the hardest one first. Start with the easiest one first, so you get good at it, and you can learn and have those people teach. So that would be the way I would do that. And then also the teams we found that moved fastest were the ones who spent the most time up front, just reducing as many dependencies as they could. The other thing I do is, I mentioned they're built for speed. You didn't get to be an independent team for free. You had to, in the beginning, you actually had to work with Jeff and over multiple iterations to say, here's what our charter is, here's how we're going to measure it, and here's what we're going to do. So you had that mind share between the senior leaders and the team, because then that team's going to run fast and you don't have to talk to them as often. So those are a couple of ways to get started in that.
Last couple of questions, Ben.
Colin, hi, my name's Ben, working with the AWS team here. I was kind of curious, what's one of your personal kind of highlights while working at Amazon?
Oh, I had a lot of them, but the time working with Jeff, I just was incredibly lucky to spend time with Jeff, and so even just getting to, like, you're sitting in an elevator or traveling from one meeting to the next, to ask, well, why did you do this? The only times I say, well, why did Jeff do this, is when I literally asked him, because most times I saw people say, well, Jeff said this because they were actually wrong, because they never really asked him, and his reasoning was, usually was quite different. So that was one. I think also looking at, Amazon was not just this rocket ship. If you look, there's a roller coaster of ups and downs. And notice that the people who really thrive there are the ones who always notice that we're improving the customer experience. The press may not like this, or other companies may not like it, but we're really kept. And you could tell the people who are there for the mission to improve customers' lives day after day. So that then became part of me moving into other careers. Those are a couple of things.
Thanks.
Fantastic. One last question. JM.
Colin, you mentioned that at the time you were spending about 20% of your time on recruiting, on hiring. I assume the other senior leaders were similarly busy with recruiting. What was the other 80% about in the daily lives of senior leaders at Amazon at the time?
Yeah, so 20% recruiting is about right, and that was throughout my whole time there at Amazon, by the way. And then the other big components were ingestion of ideas, so PRFAQs. I'm not kidding. Where my kids would say, "Well, what did you do today?" And I'd say, "Well, I read a lot." And they're like, "Dad, what are you doing? You just read?" It's hard to read these documents, and the presenting team has done a great job putting in this whole argument, and then it's the reader's job to go help make this idea better. So that was probably 2 meetings a day. There are a set of, in terms of the operating cadence, there's the weekly business reviews, the quarterly and monthly business reviews for different operating units. That was another good part of it. Talking to customers. Now, if you're in a B2B business, you can actually talk to the customers. If you're in a B2C, you need to start getting and ingesting all of the data. It's hard to overstate the amount of data that you look at when you're at Amazon in terms of what was the customer experience. So if you can talk to your customers directly and get that high fidelity data, great. If it's a concentrated base, if not, you need to have this constant ingestion, because that's the raw ingredients for your innovation moving forward. So those are, and then a couple other standing type operating cadence meetings. But most of it, I would say, that's what falls about 75% of it, at least, is execution focused. 75 to 80% is really execution focused.
Colin, thanks for an amazing session. It goes without saying that to have you here in person would obviously be a massive highlight. This is probably the nicest place in Australia, Meridian Beach here on the Sunshine Coast. So if your travels ever bring you this way, please consider this a place where you'll have lots of friends and people who'd love to take you out for lunch, dinner, drinks, and a good old Australian barbecue. Thanks so much for taking the time today. Most importantly, thanks for doing the work. I mean, the thing that makes the tech industry incredible to me is the fact that we share best practices like this. I mean, this just elevates everybody's game. Anyone who could be bothered reading the book, listening to the many podcasts you've appeared on, using the templates and stuff you've provided, can just up their chances of success so significantly. And that's what makes the tech industry the thing that just goes like a hockey stick and everyone goes, my God, the world's changing so quickly. It's because we do this. So to have you dial in today is incredibly generous, and another big hand for Colin.
Thank you.